Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Harold Holzer, and I'm the director of Roosevelt House, and it's a pleasure to welcome you and to welcome our special guests, Ezra Knight, Erin Fritsch, and Asher Goodman, here to Roosevelt House for a special program organized by our own Bill Herbert, director of the National Center for the Study of Collective Bargaining in Higher Education and the Professions. I know that's a mouthful, but I've said it, and now we don't have to say it again, right, Bill? Bill and the center are here in the house on a regular basis, but I did want to say to those students who may be here for the first or second time, and certainly to our SAG-AFTRA friends, that you could not have chosen, or had chosen for you, I guess, a more appropriate site for you to update the Hunter community on the status of this intensely watched job action than here at Roosevelt House, because this is not only, as most of you know, the New York City home of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt for the 25 years leading up to the presidency and for the presidential transition, particularly of 1932 and 3. But this is the place where the first woman member of a presidential cabinet and the longest serving Secretary of Labor in American history, Frances Perkins, arrived 90 years ago for the consequential job interview that resulted in her taking the job. But before she agreed to take the job, she exacted an agreement from the president-elect just 3 floors above in the library where we were just hanging out, also known now as our green room. She said, Mr. President, or she said, Governor, actually, he was governor of New York, I will take the job if you will let me work on minimum wage, maximum hours, and old age pensions, like we began to work on in Albany. So this house was not only the birthplace of much of the New Deal reforms that I hope we don't take for granted today, like Social Security. Tell your grandparents that you're in the home where Social Security was born today. But also workman's comp, limits on child labor, minimum wage, and maximum hours, all born in that room upstairs. So all these labor reforms can be traced to Roosevelt House, and that's why it's such an appropriate place. And also the beginnings of the New Deal kind of were overlapping with the beginnings of the Screen Actors Guild, because the bank closings resulted in the reduction of pay in Hollywood, the 50% cut in salary, and then the creation of SAG in response, all in mid-1933. And of course, the first presidents of SAG were both New Yorkers, Ralph Morgan and Eddie Cantor. I know you don't know those names. I know Eddie Cantor. Ralph Morgan's brother was the Wizard of Oz. He was the Wizard of Oz, so that's important. So this is the place where you've gathered. It's perfect, and we look forward to hearing the discussion on issues that Ralph Morgan and Eddie Cantor and Frances Perkins could never have imagined are in the discussion now. To lead us into the talk before Bill starts the panel, and what will, I'm sure, be a terrific conversation, let's welcome the director of the Public Policy Program at Roosevelt House, Dr. Basil Smikle.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Good. One more time. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Have you ever been on a picket line? There are no quiet voices. There's no passivity here. This is real important stuff of individuals and their families. So we got to be ready, right? Is everybody ready? Yeah. All right. Thank you, Harold. It's always great to be here in the house with you, and I'm really glad, Bill, that you're here. And I'd like to also thank the staff of the Public Policy Program and this house. Phil is on the ones and twos. We used to refer to ones and twos as turntables for this conversation. They're microphones. So Phil is manning our AV. Matt, who is going to be walking around taking photos of you. I hope nobody minds. Bianca and Maria, who were integral in putting this together. This is really their idea, to bring all of you with Bill, to bring all of you to Roosevelt House to have this discussion. I have gotten into the habit lately of when students ask me the difference between public policy and political science. I say that public policy and coming into this building is really about solving problems. So hopefully some of the conversation or all of the conversation today will give our students, our faculty members, the kind of insight to help you in the path ahead, and to help us be able to solve some of these societal problems that are affecting our lives every single day. If you haven't been, as Harold said, to this building before, we do a lot of similar programs here where we invite policymakers, decision makers to come and talk about the issues that are affecting our lives every day. A week from today, actually a week from tomorrow, on Wednesday, I believe it's the 27th, we have Elsia Vasquez, who's a tenant advocate, coming to talk about affordable housing and trying to hold landlords accountable. That's obviously very important to students and to so many of us who are looking for and in need of affordable housing. And then just after that, in the next couple of weeks, we have a number of elected officials and policy leaders, as I said, coming to talk about various issues. This particular day is very near and dear to my heart because in undergrad, and Bill knows this, I got my bachelor's degree in industrial and labor relations. So spent 4 years talking about collective bargaining and the rights of workers and labor history, and was so fascinated by that. And one of my favorite classes was constitutional labor law, back when I thought I was going to be a lawyer. You know, as I think about this day in and day out, we see what's happening with the United Auto Workers. We know that the UPS workers almost went on strike. There are serious structural problems in our country right now, and it is affecting our labor force. It is affecting workers. And this is beyond me just being mad that one of my favorite movies, based on one of my favorite books, Dune, that movie's going to now come out next year. Yeah, I was mad at that. I'm a big science fiction guy, but yes, but it's beyond that. We can be upset in the moment for the sort of day-to-day of what's happening, but just think about the bigger trend here. Think about what these individuals are experiencing day to day, including one of my college friends and a great friend and writer, Erica Green, who I was hoping could be here today. I think she has contributed to New Amsterdam, that show. If you love it, if you love that show, she was a writer on that show. So I always center her and center the people who are involved in the things that entertain us, that we enjoy day in and day out. What are they experiencing? And our panel that includes Ezra, Erin, Asher, and moderated by Bill will get us to today. So thank you so much for coming. Bianca, Maria, and others, thank you so much for putting this together. Bill, thank you for moderating. And we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks again. Thank you all.
Thank you, Basil and Harold. This year, workers in different industries throughout the country have re-embraced the strike as a powerful and necessary tool for their economic interests, to both protect and expand their economic gains. Some have labeled this strike wave as the hot strike summer, but in reality, it is more like the year of the strike, which with the ongoing strikes by SAG-AFTRA, the Writers Guild, and United Auto Workers, as well as the credible strike threats at UPS, Kaiser Permanente, and elsewhere. So remember, the strikes are not the only form of job action. A lot of times strike threats could be as equally as powerful. So our times can rightfully be called the Great Labor Resurgence rather than the Great Resignation. Today we'll be hearing firsthand from SAG-AFTRA leaders and members about their careers, their union's history and bargaining demands, and the status of negotiations with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, known as AMPTP. Strikes frequently reflect their times, and the strikes by SAG-AFTRA and the Writers Guild certainly reflect our times. SAG-AFTRA President Fran Drescher, who I should mention is a Queens native and a former CUNY student, stated it very well in July. This is her quote: "This is a moment of history and is a moment of truth. If we don't stand tall right now, we're going to be in trouble. We're going to be in jeopardy of being replaced by machines and big business who care more about Wall Street than you and your family," end quote. Indeed, new disruptive technologies such as AI and stagnant wages are exacerbating income inequality, which has steadily increased over the past 4 decades as union density declined. The annual salary of a CEO has grown to be 399 times the annual salary of production and non-supervisory workers. Quite a gap, and much greater than it's been in decades. In these times, public support for labor is at the highest it has been in decades. With 67% supporting the SAG-AFTRA strike, SAG-AFTRA workers, according to a recent Gallup poll. Even more significant is the support for labor among young adults, many of whom are in this room, with 90% supporting unions and strikes, according to recent poll. So it's very appropriate that we hold this panel discussion at Roosevelt House, the former home of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt. And as Harold mentioned, there's a significant event took place here in 1933 with Francis Perkins. But 2 years later, in 1935, Franklin Roosevelt signed one of the most momentous labor statutes ever in the United States, known as the National Labor Relations Act. And the SAG-AFTRA and other private sector workers have the ability to go on strike, have the ability to engage in collective bargaining, and to organize based on that statute of 1935, which remains the law of the land, where it's federal policy to encourage collective bargaining. And representatives from SAG-AFTRA today are going to be presenting in reality, in real time, what it's like to have those rights behind, what can be done with those rights. So let me now introduce our panel. Ezra Knight is an actor, performer, and the SAG-AFTRA New York local president, and a member of the SAG-AFTRA negotiating team, the national negotiating team. Early this month, he was reelected by a landslide as the union's New York local president. Prior to his current position, Ezra served as a SAG-AFTRA New York local vice president. He was also one of the union leaders who successfully advocated for the March 2012 merger of the Screen Actors Guild and the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists to form what's now known as SAG-AFTRA. And we're going to be asking some questions about that merger and the importance of it and the historic nature of it. As you probably know, Ezra has been on many, many TV shows, on Broadway and in movies. His most recent movie is The Tender Bar, directed by George Clooney. And it's a long list of incredible credits, both on television, movies, and on Broadway. Next, after Ezra, we have Erin Fritsch. And Erin is a SAG-AFTRA member for 23 years and an Actors Equity member for 17 years. She's a proud union performer who has appeared on Broadway and in dozens of films, television, animated, and commercial projects. She has been involved with many, many negotiation committees over time. And she, along with Ezra, is a part of the national negotiation team. So we're going to hear firsthand from both of them about the negotiations that's been taking place with the motion picture industry. She's a strike captain for the SAG-AFTRA picket lines and was recently reelected to the SAG-AFTRA local board. We're going to ask Erin later about what it's like, what a picket captain does, and learn more about what's been happening in New York at the 4 locations where picketing is taking place. And the third speaker is going to be Asher Grodman, who's an actor, director, writer, and producer, and a member of SAG-AFTRA. But for us, it's very important that Asher is actually on faculty here and works in the Hunter College Theater Department. So welcome, Asher. Asher also works across all mediums and currently stars, as you probably know, as Trevor on the CBS comedy Ghosts. Now, I decided that in looking at the names, I realized that we have actually the name from a new law firm and potentially a new TV show. Think about it: Ezra, Erin, and Asher. Sounds good, right? So we're gonna see whether that can be done after the strike is over. Again, a comedy based on a law firm of actors who turn to become lawyers. So.
I'd be the dead weight in that law firm.
So what I want to do is start with asking each of you to talk about the relationship between your career and what being a SAG-AFTRA member has meant to your career.
Thanks, Bill, and welcome. It's great to see so many young faces. I hope this is translating the old talk into the new ears. It brings me back to my own beginning as a young actor, where I could not imagine that I would be sitting in this seat here speaking to you all from this podium right now. I always just wanted to act and consider myself an artist who was a creative. I still am both those things, but you'll be amazed where things can lead you. And you'll follow a path that's uniquely yours, but the arrival points may surprise you. So I'm talking about things now that when I was younger, they weren't important to me. Pension and healthcare weren't really important to me as a young person. You don't think of these things until later. But what was dropped into my ear was the value of a union card. So when I got my Actors Equity Association card for theater, because that's where I began, was in the theater, that led to me getting a SAG card in 1987, because a company was videotaping my company, which was an equity company, perform a short play. And by rules and bylaws of the Actors Equity Association rules, you have to make that theater union person a SAG person if you do that with them, using their likeness, a big point of topic, using their likeness in a film or a video. So the interplay between the unions, I kind of learned really early on, was significant. So all of a sudden, I had a SAG card as well as an Actors Equity card, and that was very important to me. I had a teacher that kind of told me the value of a union card, because it proves that you are a union performer. You are a professional who's worthy of the benefits of societal labor and law protecting you, as well as healthcare, unemployment insurance, all these little things that comprise the core of what a professional career is, what a laborer's work should entail. But also, as a performer, I kind of was awakened to the importance of those dynamics. So it's something that's been with me from early on, and it's so as an advocate for other performers is where this desire to lead also grew from. Because once you're in a union, then there's other dynamics that happen with your fellow union members. And that was important to me to represent those interests as an equity deputy for a play or for the theater, who's representative between management and the company. And then moving on further to my first national board seat in 2011, running on election on the strength of the merger between SAG and AFTRA, which took place. And so these things kept me engaged. So my involvement there kind of began in 2011 in terms of where I am on this particular path as a national board member, a vice president, and now New York local president. So it's been an interesting path, and one that's very much connected to being of service and protecting the interests of my fellow performers and fellow artists.
Oh, sure. Sorry, Asher.
No, please. I'm the dead weight of this.
No,
so please
you're not.
Continue.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, I did a lot of community theater as a child. My father ran a small theater, and I knew very early I wanted to be an actor. I didn't really understand that you could make a living doing it, but I knew about unions because my mother was a teacher and my grandparents were teachers. And so I knew that teachers had unions, and that was a really big, really powerful thing. I went on to study theater at NYU, got my degree in theater, and kind of set on the path like you do when you put that kind of money into an arts education, in hoping you can somehow try to find a way to make a living doing this thing that you love so much. I'm going to go back to that in a second, but just while it's in my head, one thing that I love to tell students now when we go and talk is creative labor is still labor, and a labor of love is still labor. So I just want to put that out there. I think that's a really important, fundamental thing to understand, especially in the context of our strike right now. Anyway, there I was getting my theater degree. I had a lot of student debt, And I decided to start auditioning, did all the things you have to do, and I got a commercial, which people might not know is SAG-AFTRA covered work and can be really lucrative work for people trying to start out or building a career, and it can kind of help float you financially while you're waiting in between those TV jobs or those theater jobs or whatnot. It was for Burger King, and I had to get as many hamburgers in my mouth as humanly possible. So I also was given a spit bucket, which is something that I had because it was a union job, and they were not going to let me eat an inordinate amount of burgers. So yes, I do a little bit of everything, portfolio actor, as a friend of mine once called it. And that's a majority of our members do that, You go job to job. You hope for that big job that's going to change your career, but you're also steadily working in the meantime, in commercials, and I do animation, voiceover, that kind of thing. All of these are contracts that SAG-AFTRA has that help to support members. My union involvement began in the context of a commercial collective bargaining session in 2019. Despite being a member for 23 years, I didn't really understand or grasp that the union is the members and that it's us. It's those people who volunteer, that show up, that sit on negotiating committees, who sit on national boards and local boards, that actually have a say not only in our wages but our working conditions and how our union operates. And it's a really powerful thing to be a part of. So it's kind of like they say, you get the acting bug or you get bit by it. I guess there's a union, I don't know, spider or something that I don't know what kind of bug it would be, but yeah, I got bit by that bug, and I've been very passionate about collective bargaining, having served on now 2 rounds of commercials, 2 rounds of corporate educational bargaining, and I'm a first-timer on our TV theatrical negotiating committee. Really proud to be a part of it, especially in this historic moment. And yeah, it's a really powerful experience. Fran, the quote you said is right. This is a historical moment, not just for our union, but for all of labor. So yeah. And thank you for having me.
Sure. Thank you.
That was great. The creative labor thing is a really, that hits home. I think, my name is Asher. I'm not involved in the union outside of being a member of it, and so I'm very glad to be here. I would imagine that every union is in some way a reflection of the industry. And this industry is a very unique one from what I've gathered in my career. There's a celebrity to this that is not reflective of the reality of this lifestyle. And social media would not lead, you wouldn't put that together if you look at the news and social media and stuff like that and your favorite television shows. But you have to scrape together a life. I've been doing this for north of 20 years, and it took me almost 2 decades to get healthcare. And that was just play to play, off episodes of television shows, and then oddly, in a weird way, won the lottery by getting the show that I'm on. And so now my reality is not what most people go through, which is hopefully you get a few episodes of television every year and you can make that, it's 26 grand of earnings a year to get healthcare in this incredibly competitive business. The membership is 160,000 members, and
Well, the voting demographic is different than the total number of members, but 160,000 members, yeah.
So 160,000 members, 20,000 earn enough to get healthcare. So it's an industry where you are scraping and clawing, and the only one really in your corner is the union, because in a place where there are so many people who want these jobs, and the business gives you a sense that you're very replaceable. The idea of you having any rights at all, there's only one thing standing in your corner, and that's the union. So I'm super grateful for the protections that I've had, and we are at an existential moment in here because it would be super cost effective, it appears, to replace many of us with AI. And that's not just actors. That's if you use this technology, take a picture from the front to the sides, and just you can go home, you're done. That doesn't get rid of an actor's career, it gets rid of hair, makeup. Everyone who's going to film school, that's over. You're done. Crew, camera, lights, sound, done. People who drive cars, done. So it's a huge moment right now, and this is it just happens to be our turn, but other industries are going to face this.
So Ezra, the 160,000 members, what's the composition of the SAG-AFTRA membership?
The composition is of multiple categories of work that we call them. So there's actor performers. That the subsets of that would include background actors, stand-ins. We have stunt performers, because you need those as well to cover the terrain of the acting side of it. We also have puppeteers are part of SAG-AFTRA. Pilots who fly planes are part of SAG-AFTRA. You have scenes in movies where you go to the cockpit of a plane, that's like a SAG-AFTRA member, right? Broadcasters and journalists, broadcast journalists are part of SAG-AFTRA. It's an enormous tent with a lot of entities within it. Singers and recording artists, dancers. And in all that strata, we have performers with disabilities, seniors, then the ethnic array within all those categories as well. So you see a real spectrum of not only labor, but of American society reflected in our union. Did I leave it in any categories? Oh, voiceover artists. I do that as well. Thank you very much.
Imagine that with that voice.
Voiceover artists, animated, which is animation as well as narration for audiobooks, digital audio. So it's a large terrain of work and multiple categories within the 160,000. And that number fluctuates, actually, because it's a living, breathing thing. As members enter, the number grows. As members leave, the numbers decrease. So it's always, so our safe quota is 160K for SAG-AFTRA members.
And so the union negotiates contracts, correct? And for the audience, can you describe what the contracts provide for and how many contracts does SAG-AFTRA have approximately?
Oh my goodness. Bernie, do you know how many? I couldn't give you a quote. Yeah, there's a lot of them, and I kind of alluded to some of the different ones. We have a podcast, TV theatrical, low-budget film commercials. We have influencer agreements now for people who put out content on social media. There's so many different contracts, and at all different budget levels. Certainly in the low-budget film industry, we have a micro budget, where pay can be deferred. But yeah, all of these are collectively bargained agreements.
And so what are some of the terms, what are the subject matters of those contracts?
Yeah, so I mean, the simplest way to say is the W and Ws, as we call it, which is the process we have in our union. The first W being wages, and the second W being working conditions. I think that is the fundamental principle of what we bargain in a collective bargaining session. And under that, that's everything from scale to overtime pay to, the penalties for late fees, everything you could possibly imagine. You can all go on the SAG-AFTRA website, by the way, and download. If you're a contract nerd, like I happen to be, they're open for anybody to read, and they're pretty big because it's years and decades of committees and members like myself and Ezra who have come before us who have come together and said, hey, this doesn't feel great on set, or I think we're worth more, or hey, inflation is up here and I think we should be making more. And they change it every 2 to 3, 4 years. Each contract has its own kind of shelf life. For TV theatrical, which we're striking now, it's a 3-year contract, which means every 3 years it's up for renegotiation. And you have a bargaining partner. That's the other piece of it. And in this case, it's the AMPTP.
And you all are familiar with the term called minimum wage, right? Is that, even now as we live and exist, is the national minimum wage commensurate with a viable living wage? No, a lot of heads shaking. You guys get that, right? So part of the CBA, the collective bargaining process collective bargaining agreement, is to set a floor, which we call is you can't make less than this. Actors Equity Association negotiates it, SAG-AFTRA negotiates it through all the contracts that we have, that you will make no less than this, and then it goes up and beyond. So you have someone like a Tom Cruise, thank you very much, very good, who makes the sky's the limit, what Tom Cruise or Meryl Streep can make, right? Viola Davis makes a lot of money. Like there's the millions of dollars for a film. For someone like myself or Aaron, or I think you're doing pretty good too. You know,
We call him an above scale actor.
they're above scale, right? That's scale. The floor is a scale, and then we negotiate that scale, and in that scale is pension and health considerations as well as residuals, and then when you come back to the table, you talk about wage increases over time. So that's kind of the general structure of it.
And so these contracts are negotiated by the union, and then they are enforced by the union, right? And so what does as leaders and as members, what do you do to protect the terms of that contract in terms while it's in existence?
That's one of our 4 pillars of institutionality for SAG-AFTRA, is negotiating contracts, enforcement of contracts, education and outreach, and I always forget the 4th. Oh, man. Anyway, yes, so we have a legal staff of incredible, devoted lawyers who are experts in the field of the economics around these contracts, the range of those contracts, how they're used, and projecting how future usage may occur, reflecting on past usage and what that was, how to keep things moving forward, and to solidify them and to do whatever they can, our staff does, to protect and enforce those contracts.
Yeah, and in addition to the lawyers who are a part of the claims department, we have a massive claims department. Any amount of late payment, it is, I just can't emphasize enough what a huge thing that is to have a whole body of people working on your behalf when your money's late. You don't get that in a non-union environment. You're left to kind of figure it out for yourself if they ever decide to pay you. And that claims department is incredible. They work really hard. It's a beautifully streamlined process online right now. You just go in as a member, you log in, you put your information, and there is a team fighting to get you paid. It's really something.
Payment of residuals. That's the 4th pillar. Right?
Which is another very
Which
big
is
thing
a
that we
big
collectively
deal
bargained
right
for.
now.
Yes.
It's one of our
Oh,
4 pillars
residuals.
is getting our members paid in a timely manner to process the residuals that come, whether they're late or on time. That's the thing, is a department to get that money out to our members.
So just for clarification, when you say residual, what are you referencing?
Well, 60 years ago in the famous strike that gave us, when the last time the writers and performers went on strike, those negotiations garnered pension and health care and residuals, which is a way of paying for a cycle or a certain usage of the product to give the actor that performance after their initial compensation for performing in it.
And that 1960 strike, I think you're referring to,
Yes.
that was, again, a sea change in terms of technology.
It was.
And what was the technology that was new then that involved residuals? Television.
Thank you. Television.
And the
Television.
question was about residuals was the question of playing movies, showing movies on television,
Yes.
and whether the actors were going to get residuals.
Yes,
And so there was a strike in 1960 over that.
that's right.
And what
right.
did that lead to?
It led to what we have now, what we understand now as residuals, as well as fair compensation for wage increases over time, and then, as I said, the health and welfare contributions.
So now we're at another point in history, a new technology. Once it was television, and it was a new technology. Now we have
Streaming. I feel like I'm back in class
Dun
now.
dun dun. Streaming.
streaming. We have streaming and AI, right?
Yes.
And so streaming is something that we're all familiar with as consumers. Everyone in this room is familiar with it as consumers. But what does it mean in terms of residuals when your program, when your performance is now being streamed? How much residuals do you receive?
Well, probably the least qualified person to answer this. But I will say this: the residual. So as Ezra is saying, as an artist, you're kind of paid in two ways: one for the work that you put in, and then a sense of residuals. So, in other words, if the thing that you do gets played a lot and is seen a lot, you get a small piece of that puzzle, which is very important when it comes to things like healthcare and how much you earn in a given year. When really Netflix kind of started it with this invention of a streaming platform, which just meant instead of us following the usual model, which is we make something, if you like it, money and advertisements and stuff like that comes in, instead we have a library. And so you're going to come into our library and pay a subscription for our library, and then we don't really have to tell anyone if what we make is a hit or a flop. It doesn't matter because you're paying anyway. What that kind of got them out of, that's not the right term, but what that made very tricky was the idea of residuals, because technically no one knew. No one knows how much anything is being watched. Even at companies where there is a network arm and a streaming arm, the network arm probably doesn't know how much their own shows are being seen in the streaming arm, even though they're in the same company, because that's the business model. And so we're figuring out now, these guys are figuring out how that works on the artist side, on the labor side.
So as a part of collective bargaining, you are trying to gather that information to be able to negotiate receiving the residuals connected with streaming.
Well, in a perfect world, that you hit it so on the nail, like that, they have that information. The companies know. I mean, there are, I'm sure, algorithm after algorithm that tell them exactly how many people watch and how long they watch, and that's definitely informing their decisions on what they bring back for another season or how many episodes of a season. They know that information, often, like Asher said, not even within the different levels of the company, but they certainly don't tell us that information because they don't want one another to know that information because of competition. You can't let out your secret. But without that information, it's really hard to place a value or have any sense of how much something is watched. And then how do you fairly compensate performers for it? And essentially what happened is you had tech companies coming in. We had a model that worked pretty well. It was advertiser-based, where you had your main networks, and they got advertising revenue, and some of that revenue paid the performers when their shows re-aired. And everything kind of worked nicely. And then Netflix and streamers came along. These are tech companies also, I should mention, in the room. We've got traditional media companies that we bargain with, and we have Apple, we have Hulu, we have Amazon, we have Netflix. And it's a new business model. And they went ahead and changed the model. And we're basically saying now the contract has to change with it. You can't change the way TV is consumed and the way that you produce it without considering all of us and adjusting so that we can all be fairly compensated. Because to be honest, they can't do it without us.
And yes, bravo, absolutely, absolutely. There's a real cynical harbinger in this thing in the guise of Netflix, which seemed to be on a mission to crush the old Hollywood, unquote, system, right? Where they decided to library content, to disclose and to not disclose, but to black box all of the noted information, the key information as to the numbers of what things were being watched and how successful things were. A show like Orange is the New Black made Netflix who Netflix is. It was highly successful. Those performers got crap wages for those productions. Even today, they still can't get them back. Many of them are frustrated and still had to wait tables and do other jobs and whatever to survive while that show was immensely successful, and they are becoming stars. Now, a few of them have emerged successfully from that series and have gone on to greater successes. Most of them have not. So it was a really interesting dynamic how Netflix kind of made this happen. Even their stockholders didn't have information that was relevant to what the company actually was. But millions and millions and millions was given to this tech startup company to do the thing that they were doing, to create their product, and it succeeded. But now we're getting the telltale signs of the darker secrets behind it, because now Netflix is part of the AMPTP, because they started getting into the streaming game too. And the business model is a broken one, certainly as far as we're concerned, because it has kind of forsaken the original relationship between the performers and the producers, and how the money is shared, how the content is delivered, how it's given to you. They're counting on people being kind of not caring and apathetic to what happens here. So I know that's a dynamic too that we're up against as a public that's largely apathetic and just wants to click a button and watch the next thing. So we're out here, part of this is a mission to educate and to open up the dialogue and open up the windows a bit to what we're up against, what we all are on one level or other, because we're talking about corporate greed and unsanctioned exploitation of labor, because that leads us back to where we are about collective bargaining and the worker and the value of our work.
So SAG-AFTRA is in the midst of negotiations. Negotiations are resumed with AMPTP. And who does that entity represent? What companies does that entity represent in the collective bargaining?
Yeah, it's as Aaron said.
Yeah, it's Netflix, Amazon, NBC
Apple.
Universal, Apple,
Paramount,
Disney,
Warner Brothers Discovery,
Sony.
Sony.
I'm thinking of all of our picket locations.
You don't know any of these guys, but they're big companies. They do a lot of
just some small
stuff.
potato, and
little guys.
yeah, and they that's the idea. They all come together, and they've got their people, and we have our people, and you sit in a room together for many weeks, and you pass proposals back and forth, and you hope you can reach a contract and a conclusion.
But from an economic basis, it's really David and Goliath. You're dealing with massive corporations, and
Yes.
the union is negotiating with this organization that represents those entities. Now, how do, just in terms of how collective bargaining works, does SAG-AFTRA come with proposals to negotiations?
Correct.
And how are those proposals developed?
What Aaron alluded to before, the W&Ws are the wages and working conditions sessions that we hold with our members who come and tell us what's going on out there in the world, their world, what are their concerns, what can we make better, what's being abused here, what enlightenment can you offer. Between those sessions as well as our staff, and because contracts kind of evolve over time. These are legal documents, so you build upon those.
We have a law firm here, I understand.
That's right, yeah, Ezra, Aaron, and Nasher. Yeah, so we build upon the previous contracts and try to make the next one better based on those evolving conditions that may be referred through the W&Ws. Then there's a plenary that after we've collected all that information, we then have another committee that forms the negotiating committee, but with the plenary, called a plenary, where we look at those derived, filtered, the sausages being made as we kind of define what the core issues are as we move forward, and then we begin the process of negotiating.
Yeah, and I think it's worth saying that a plenary, having done a couple, and Ezra as well, we've both done several rounds of collective bargaining in the past. They're usually over a weekend, a 2 to 3 day process. We had an unprecedented, I believe, 7 or 8 day plenary. This negotiation, we knew from the get-go, from the W&Ws, from the turnout of the membership, basically saying this isn't okay. Getting 3-cent residual checks from my show that's on streaming that is watched over and over and over again. Fear of AI technology. We knew that it was a tall task, and you know, we were given, as part of that negotiating plenary committee, which then becomes the negotiating committee, we really took that responsibility very seriously and took the time we needed to make sure that everybody's voices were heard, every demographic of every kind of category that contract represents, from singers to dancers to stunt performers to actor performers and background artists. Everybody is represented in those proposals, and that it ultimately comprised the package that we pushed across the table. It was a large one on day one, and they have their producer proposals that they pass our way, which tend to, when you look at the two sides, it makes sense. Theirs are more kind of rollbacks and things that they don't want, and ours tend to be gains and increases and those kind of protections. And that's how the process starts.
And so what's the size of the negotiating team for SAG-AFTRA?
What are you, 40? people?
Around there.
Around 40 people.
There's
40.
voting members, alternates, and we have a bullpen, so
Right.
there's different
Right.
levels,
And-
but we all work together.
And the team is elected by the members?
Selected by the president.
By the president. And so ultimately, though, it's a democratic process in
That's
terms of from the development of the proposals to presenting them. And so, and you indicated that the companies come with proposals as well. What happens then after the proposals are exchanged? What's it like in the room?
Screaming,
Hair pulling.
bloodletting, blood pressure rising. Yeah, it's about compromise ultimately, which is, as you see in our national politic, is not an easy thing to derive when two sides have such differing issues. It's always a challenge. It's a human frailty as well as a human exploration as to what happens in negotiating process. But that's the process. You want people who are able to be knowledgeable in where they come from. So many of us are member leaders who are part of the negotiating committee, or certainly have at least working experience and or leadership experience or negotiating experience to come into the room to be a productive entity within the space as well.
And I think it's also worth mentioning that it's not just the members. We have our amazing staff, and so that team is led by Duncan Crabtree Ireland, who's our National Executive Director, and Ray Rodriguez, who, I don't know Ray's official head of everything contracts. He's incredible, and together they are incredible. And not to mention all of our staff, the residual department, everybody. So it is a massive staff group and committee, and then there's the member side, and we all come together and are in the room together. Our legal team. So again, it's not just to give you a sense, it's not just 40 members, like Ezra said, who do understand the process, who work the contract, but it's us working very intimately and closely with our staff, and together we kind of come work back and forth as you kind of go through the process.
And so negotiations went on for how long before the strike vote for SAG-AFTRA this year?
They started
June 5th.
June
or
5th.
6th.
June 5th, and then they were scheduled to go to July.
Well, the end of June.
June
End of
30th,
June, and then there was
June
an
30th.
extension, right?
Yes, right.
And
June
then we
30th.
extend, yep.
And we did a controversial vote to extend 12 days. Now, granted, we came into the negotiations with the strike authorization, which is there's strike and there's threat of strike. Both can be valuable. Strike authorization was a referendum sent to the members who say yes or no to go in with the possibility of striking without coming to negotiations first, seeing that things are not agreeable, go back to membership and ask, can we strike? We came in right away with the agreement from membership to the tune of about 98% of the voting members to approve strike authorization. So we came to the table with that in hand, which says to them, we are so serious right now about this. We want to get this done. We don't want to use this, but we will if we have to, so let's talk. So we came in with that. So in that span of time from June 5th through the 30th, we were negotiating. So it was about 5 weeks or so. And then the extension, and over that 12-day extension, basically nothing happened. It was, to our perspective, they basically wasted that time and came back with nothing appealing at the very end of it. Also, the day before the very end of it, they brought in federal mediators kind of out of the blue, which is another statement and kind of a weird act at the end of this serious, very heated negotiation process. So,
And so, what were the issues that remained in controversy that resulted in the decision to go out on strike? What?
I mean, the big ones, artificial intelligence, AI. We talked about this idea. We have a proposal to share in streaming revenue.
Right.
That's a big piece
for
of it.
successful series, right.
For successful series. Basic wage increases that keep up with inflation. That's a huge one. Increasing our pension and health caps that haven't been touched in 40 years. Those are kind of the big ones. And then there's a whole host of other things. You know, we were making a lot of momentum with, you know, self-tape. That's something that's new that affects every performer at every level who auditions. We made headway, but we weren't 100% there. So, but the big ones are really wages, AI, and the streaming.
And they refused to address our big ones in a way that made any respectful sense.
So just-
The revenue streaming, they didn't even deal with. No answer, no response at all. The wage increase, they just wanted to hold this pathetically low pattern. We're accounting for the COVID pandemic, which, as we've all seen, toppled so many things and disrupted so many elements societally and economically as far as the labor force goes, that we're at a very vulnerable place because you account that as well with the inflation rate, so that what was being suggested by them would have put us back to a pre-COVID rate of compensation that is just not tolerable,
acceptable.
not acceptable at all.
But maybe explain just briefly what the concerns are regarding AI and how it would impact actors and other members of SAG-AFTRA.
Can I just real quick?
Yeah.
By the way, if you go onto the SAG website, it's actually really fascinating to see. There's a list of the proposals, and then a list of what the producer's response was. And if you ever want to feel concerned for the
grid.
future, give it a read.
thanks,
The
Asher.
AI thing, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, the technology already exists and maybe even being deployed for background actors to take a picture of the front of you and the side of you, and then you go home and that's it. And they're going to craft your performance and place you in there. I have seen episodes of my show Ghosts written by AI. We're already here. This is already happening. So if you're a writer, done. We don't need you anymore. Now, that's not entirely true. I mean, I don't understand the technology of AI, but I do believe that it's not going to invent anything new. But what do I know? The students of mine that are here, you guys know that above all in class, I would always prioritize spontaneity, right? Having a real conversation, having something really happen, right? AI is probably not going to be able to do that, but it'll approximate that. And it's not far off. I mean, you're talking about really just being plucked out and replaced by a computer. And again, it's not just the actors, it's everyone in a production.
And just that's one of the issues in the Writers Guild strike is the same issue with AI.
Absolutely, yes.
And I think it's important to note, you're completely right. The technology's here. This isn't a matter of saying, like, go backwards in time. What we're talking about, and the writers as well, it's about compensation for it. It's about control over where and how anything is used. Control, compensation, there's a third C. What am I thinking of? Control, compensation, and consent. That's the big one. Consent. For all of us, for every performer to say, no, I actually don't want to have a digital replica. Somebody might say, sure, I love that. If you're going to pay me enough money, here's the price, then go ahead and do it. So we believe performers have that right to make that decision. But yeah, consent, compensation, and control over where and how it's using. That we don't believe that is too much to ask. And yet the companies think that they should pay us, background actors in particular, one session fee, scan them, and then have that likeness in perpetuity, forever, wherever. And it's just never gonna happen.
Don't chat GPT your term papers,
Yeah.
okay? Just be honest, write the damn thing like a real person. But I mean, this is facetious only because you know how serious it's with us now. So just like we could never predict the power of cable and how that decimated network television, CBS, ABC, NBC, how the model changed. Then streaming comes. We're at a new inflection point of that. Who saw, some had an idea or a clue. They quickly adjusted the chairs to sort of fit that model, and now have been profiting to the billions of dollars upon it. And now everybody can see that AI is starting to encroach on everyone's life through your phones and all technology. It's not going anywhere. We want to put fences around this and get some reins on it now before they start to proliferate with it. It's not really an active money earner for them yet. We see it though, and we know that they see it. It's already with us. As Asher was saying, it's already happening. So we want to make sure we're there and ahead of the game. We're trying to stay, because it's very fast. It's all happening so amazingly fast.
Yeah, Netflix
that we
was
wanna be
10
part of
years
that.
ago.
Yeah,
Everything's changed in 10 years.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
before we go to questions, I want to ask Erin, as a picket captain,
Oh.
to talk a little bit about the pickets and where is SAG-AFTRA picketing, and how people in the audience can maybe get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So you don't have to be a member to join our pickets. We encourage everybody. If you're a supporter, please come down. We're there most days of the week. You can go to sagaftrastrike.org to get the updated list, or just follow SAG-AFTRA on social media. All the strike captains post stuff too, so you can find a person, follow them, that kind of thing. But right now we have 4 locations running. We're down at Netflix, Warner Brothers Discovery, which is at 888 Broadway, 19th Street. We have a location up at Rockefeller Center, which is picketing NBC Universal. We've got Hudson Yards, which is HBO and Amazon. And we also picket at 1515 Broadway, which is home to Paramount. So that's the 4 locations in New York. Some weeks we have specialty pickets. We do a lot with the Writers Guild. They're often, I strike captain down at Netflix, Warner Brothers Discovery.
And
If you
she's
come
awesome.
down, thank you. I just get really excited and get people really pumped up. But we come down and say hi and tell me you were here, and we'll give you a T-shirt and a button, and you can join and walk around in a circle and hold a sign and help us out. It really makes
They're
a difference.
generally 9 to
They're
noon,
generally
right?
9:30 to noon. But again, check that information. And just other ways you can help. Again, if you support everything we're doing and you're active on social media and you follow along, get the word out, get your voice out. I don't know if people followed the Drew Barrymore drama and Bill Maher, but that is it's an incredible win for these efforts this week. The fact that not 1, not 2, but 3 shows that were doing really crappy things decided to pull back because we got loud and said this isn't okay. So all of that really matters, and you guys are the audience, and some of you are pre-members, those of you pursuing careers, and we look forward to having you in the union one day. But yeah, come to the pickets, post on social media.
The shares, the likes, they
Yeah.
matter. That's part of what happened with this
Yeah.
recent occurrence. The social media buzz was so loud and so
Yeah.
clear. They were getting flamed. So
Yeah.
it told, and they pulled back.
And the more
that's-
noise
yes.
that consumers make, we want to scare them back to the table. If you guys aren't going to settle for it.
Also, know that if and when you do come to the picket line, you will see also WGA T-shirts and members there as well. We came in full stop support, solidarity with them from the first day of their strike before we even went on strike. So we are locked step, arm in hand and heart with the WGA. So I suggest that you also include that in your thinking, because the symbiosis between the two is undeniable and very, very important.
The last thing, and then it's very easy, I think, to look at this and just say, oh, it's the actors, oh, it's the writers. But this is just the first time this is happening. It's going to have an effect in every industry. This just happens to be where the ball is right now. So whatever your interest is, whatever the field you're trying to get into, this may be coming your way. So whatever negotiations are forged in the future, we'll probably look back at this deal and say, okay, what did they do? And then find their own way. So we're just trying to set a mark.
Okay, so we have time for some questions, and I think we have a microphone coming down. So why don't we call on this gentleman right here? Oh, student. Okay.
Students first.
Students first, as it should be.
I know you're a student of life,
Okay.
but
No offense.
A student of life. Yes, go ahead.
Life.
Hello? Is this working? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you see a future for streaming as it comes to paying actors, or is this just an exploitative version of entertainment that doesn't have a future?
we see the possibility, if they're able to share some of the profits that they make from it. For instance, we're asking a 2% revenue sharing. Unheard of. Like when Michael Jordan asked for a percentage on each sneaker with his name on it, they were like, get the hell out of here. No, this is not how you don't understand how this industry works. It doesn't work that way. He insisted, right? there's all kinds of intangibles. We don't know how he would become the Michael Jordan, right? But he did. And it changed the sneaker deal for every athlete subsequently following him. He changed the industry. So we're at this point. We know that asking for revenue sharing, which they don't want to hear, 2%, just peeling off 2% of revenue sharing for successful shows on streaming gives $2.1 billion a year to SAG-AFTRA. 1% is half of that. Cut that even further, what they would share would solve, it's enough to solve this strike with the writers and the actors over multiple times. So it's a lot of money we're talking about, people. It's incredible the amount that's available and that they're making, saying that they're broke. But so I think that there's a possibility. That's why we're negotiating, and we're not yet. We're still waiting for them to come back to us. They're with the writers now, so we'll see how that affects whether or not they come to us. But,
Okay, next question.
yes.
Hello, hi. Hello, hi. Thank you for coming to our school.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Hi. So you mentioned earlier how both the WGA and the SAG-AFTRA are very closely intertwined and stuff like that. I was wondering what, I guess, your reaction was when you heard that the Writers Guild were going on strike first, and how your reaction was when I believe, the Directors Guild didn't.
You want me to
This is the first time I've been in the room with Ezra, and his
He put down his mic.
pre-answer sounds are so compelling.
I could give a diplomatic answer to that.
Why don't you start with the first part of the question?
I mean, the writer, so the way that it's kind of interesting, the way that it's set up is every 3 years, all 3 unions negotiate. So it's no surprise that it would be the writers and the directors and the actors. And there's a little bit of fluidity to who negotiates first, and there's all the reasons why one would go before the other. But it's all agreed upon. So we knew we were third in line. It wasn't really a surprise with the writers. I think people knew it. We were ready to support them. Like Ezra said, our members were out. Our staff was out. On day one, we had SAG-AFTRA supporting writers. We were on every picket in LA, in New York, at all the locals. It's been a huge support. The Directors Guild, I'm not in that guild. Every collective bargaining process is those members working the best they can on behalf of their members. And while there is a lot of synergy, their issues aren't the same as our issues. Just like there's crossover, but for the directors, they felt that what the AMPTP offered addressed their needs that their members came together and fought for, and that was their decision. It wasn't the decision of the writers. It wasn't our decision, but I respect another union's right to make that decision for themselves.
Great, next
There
question.
was an awareness, at least for us, in about February that the writers were going on strike. Just so you know, that there was people knew.
Buzz on set, and yeah.
Yeah.
I was just curious how.
What's your name?
Oh, hey, my name is Matt.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, man.
Hey, I was just curious how the growth of SAG-AFTRA is right now during the strike, and I was wondering if new people joining this membership would equal more pressure on streaming services.
Yes, our resources are stretched to the nth degree right now because of this strike, because of the work stoppage and what that does, and the needs of members. We're trying to address how to help people in need, how to set up structures to help people survive. But at the same time, we have 4 strike sites here in New York City. We are a high visibility location. The demographies here are very, very striking and stunning. Same in Los Angeles and all over the country. Chicago, New Orleans, Atlanta, Portland, just all other locals are out there on the street creating energy. And I know the feeling that when I was involved in the 2000 strike for the commercials contract, I was very exhilarated by that. So it does attract new members and energy to the union. So I would say we are gaining members through this enthusiasm generated from the strike. It's a double-edged sword, as you can see, because there's no work happening, right? So you join a union that's kind of at a work shutdown. But the hope is, the energy is, that we're going to solve this. We're going to get through this, get to this agreement, get the contract that we feel is decent and respectful. It's going to give us the things that we want, as much as we can get, because we're still negotiating, right? But we have demands and a line now that we're very, very clear upon. So we want this resolved as soon as possible. We want to get back to work and make this a better union for the new members who are joining and those to come as well. So it is causing a strain. Work stoppage is painful. It's not an easy decision. We knew that as the negotiating committee, that this is a real reality in a union where people are already, 87% of people can't afford to get health care. They won't be able to get it. They won't qualify. It's a struggle. It's a very competitive industry, as Asher alluded to. So we know that that's real. The pain is real, the struggle is real, but also the hope is also something to strive for, too.
Two simple questions. Number one, how much are you projecting forward in terms of technology with virtual reality, augmented reality, and frankly, there's now the technology that you can input into the brain directly.
That's the simple question?
Well, I'm keeping it focused.
Okay, great.
And then the other question is, how does this affect your you mentioned a little bit about DGA, but what about the other crafts unions and other unions? How does it affect your relationship with the other unions?
I would say, we've had incredible solidarity from crafts, from hair and makeup, from just seeing people who are out there on the picket lines, including IATSE, Teamsters, communications workers, teachers, airline, what was it? Flight attendants. Was like there was a whole union
Starbucks
day today.
workers.
Starbucks workers. Like it's so with the crafts and others, they're in line and in solidarity with us. That's all I'm seeing. As far as technologically looking forward, we have an incredible staff and a brain trust and specific departments that are devoted to AI and technology. We're out there going to CES conferences every year, getting the latest information on what's trickling across, watching the terrain of the industry, talking to members, seeing what's being used, but always we've been on this for quite a while as well.
And I would just add one thing. I'm just thinking of our AI language and everything we're fighting for in the room. And there's very specific language that is going to include things like, and everything that, there's a way to kind of craft language that encompasses things that have yet to be created. For years we called it new media before streaming. And so there's ways and legal ways to kind of build in those protections so you're capturing things that haven't come around yet but would fall under that blanket. So you're protected.
And when they say that they want to have writing on the contract, that includes every medium created to be created in every world in perpetuity forever, and even imagined worlds forever. We know that that's unacceptable. So it's just getting these early fences will be key to being able to get behind it, because even they don't know what's coming yet fully.
I think we have time for a few more questions.
We have time for just one more question, and I already picked the student that was going to ask. I see we have a lot of people that want to engage. We do have a reception that's going to take place upstairs if the panelists can join us for that as well, and feel free to engage over there as well for the next few minutes. And we'll take one more question from you.
Hello.
Hi.
So you mentioned earlier that you were aware that the WJ was going to go on strike in February. Were there any reasons different from the actors for the writers to go on strike?
Oh, again, I'm the least qualified person for this. One of the things that, and this is please jump in if I get any of this wrong, but one of the things that is a logistical thing, it used to be when network television was the only game in town, and even cable television, you'd write 22 episodes of a television show, and that's a year. That's a year of work. A lot of these streaming shows, it's like 6 or 8 episodes. That's not that much. And that show, I'm on my show. If another show came to me and said, hey, we really want you or you come audition or come whatever, I can audition for that thing, but that show is going to be in second position because Ghosts has a contract with me. They are my priority. I am their priority. For a writer, once you're on one of those shows, 6 to 8 episodes, it's really hard to get another job. And that means that as a writer, you're basically working, like, if you're lucky, a third of the year. So that's just a lifestyle thing. And there are some other things as well, but that was one that was very clear early
There's
on.
a real desire by the writers not to have their profession turned into a gig economy, so that it's just hit and run. The desire to diminish the number of writers in a room, the size of the writer crew, not crew, but the writer group on a particular show or film, this just a full-out attack. And then have AI generate a script and then bring in a writer, a single writer, to modify the AI script into something that's more palatable, and then not pay the original writer of the script. It's a way of just bifurcating and shredding the entire writer domain. And so there's no longer a viable career for any writer, a young writer or an existing writer, to hold on to.
Yeah, and it's just job elimination. Like you said, if ChatGPT can, you feed it enough scripts of Law and Order to train it, right? It feeds out something like not that great or original, but good enough. Now you just need to hire one writer versus an entire team of writers, and you're eliminating jobs. And like you said, it's exactly it. It's the sense of a gig economy versus a career. And so much of what the writers are fighting for, I'm not a writer myself, I have many friends in the WGA, they're fighting for the survival of their profession. And that's a very real thing, and it's a huge threat, the AI.
You're also eliminating innovation.
Yeah.
Heart.
Yeah.
So we have to break now, and we have a wonderful reception planned. But I just want to thank, we've had an opportunity, very rare opportunity and a privilege, to hear from 3 people involved in a labor dispute from SAG-AFTRA. And I think we should give a round of applause to Ezra,
Thank you.
Asher, and Erin.